Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Brendan Burns Show. Today joining us is Tim Brownson. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, of course. So I'd love to start out. First of all, where are you based right now?
I'm in a place called Gotha, just outside Orlando, but as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not local to these parts. I moved from England in 2006.
Gotcha. And how did you wind up making that transition and move?
Well, we'd wanted to come for a while. As you can see, I'm a massive football fan and I'm a Rams fan. I've been since 1984. So we used to come pretty much every year to watch a game or whatever in St. Louis. And we just always had fun here. Came on loads of vacations. I used to come here on business as well. And my wife's a nurse. She's a DMP, a doctor of nursing practice. So it was easy for us to get a green card based on, but only her. It attached his head on her visa before the green card came. On mine, must accompany wife. In other words, we don't want you without your wife, mate. Stay where you are.
Gotcha. That's great. And so I was reading a little bit more about your story, and you said that in 2005, not that many people knew about life coaching. And I want to hear all about your practice and what you do. But I'd love to start just by hearing a little bit more about this industry. Like, what do you see life coaching is, and what was the evolution of this industry developing?
Well, what I see it is a mess at the moment because there's so many different people doing so many different things, and there isn't really guidelines that are enforceable. So there is most people that do formal training, like I did, are trained in something called coactive coaching, and that is what I call pure coaching, which is what the ICF, the International Coach Federation, support. But anybody can call themselves a life coach. It doesn't really mean anything. Ask people what life is. Yeah, I know what life is. It's, I'm born and, whatever. It's coaches. Yeah, coach. What's a life coach? Fuck yeah, I have no idea, The thing that people say to me more often than not is people that don't know what it is, and like on social media, I don't need somebody to tell me what to do in my life, which is fantastic because that's not what I do. I am not an expert in your life or anybody else's. I'm not even an expert in my own life, to be quite honest with you. So yes, it's just of people trying to help other people. But the crux of it is, to be a good coach, really, it's about asking questions and helping people come to their own realizations, rather than saying, go and do this, then do that, and then you'll be happy. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've met a lot of people who want to be a coach, and then they realize that they're not gaining traction, they're not getting clients, or they are getting clients, but they don't feel like they're getting results. And I ask them, why do you have this? Why are you worried about this? And they say, well, I'm not in a perfect marriage and I'm not making $10 million a year. So am I qualified to do this? And what would you say back to that?
Well, is a bald hairdresser qualified to do his job? Is a doctor who gets sick, should he have to give up his medical license? No, I mean, there's things that are sensible. You can't be a fitness coach where, weighing 350 pounds and smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and knocking back the whiskey and doing lines of coke while you're talking to your clients, So there has to be things where there's got to be some credibility. But half of my time now is working with the coaches, because I've done this for 13 years and built an online presence, more and more coaches. So I've got 2 separate businesses, and most coaches are struggling. I would say 95% of people that go into coaching are struggling because they go in for no other reason than, I've heard people say to me, I was born to be a coach, and I'm like, great, well, good luck with that if that's your marketing strategy, because that sucks. So people go into it because there's not so much a low bar to entry. The bar has been stamped into the ground. It's just, because most people have got a computer and, they can get onto Zoom or a phone or what have you. So there's really no bar to entry. So what's happened is it's been a bit like the gold rush. People have come flying into coaching thinking, oh, I can do that. They hear all these high-ticket clients, this bullshit that you get, especially on LinkedIn. It's dripping with people. I can help you get high-ticket clients by coaches that normally couldn't get clients themselves. So now they're teaching coaches.
Yeah.
So they dive into this, not realizing that it's a business. If you treat it like a hobby, you'll get hobby results. You have to understand marketing. You have to be prepared to put yourself out there. And sadly, a lot of coaches aren't, and they get burned. And I've known coaches that have wasted a lot of money, and then they've had to walk away from it. A lot of people have done that.
Yeah. No, I get those messages on LinkedIn every day.
Oh, it sucks. I got the other day, a couple of days ago, I posted it in my Facebook group for coaches. I got the exact same message from 2 different people within an hour. Because obviously there's people selling these scripts, you know, and it's always, let's just hop on a quick Zoom call. I don't want to hop anywhere with you. Fuck off and stop wasting my time. And I got a guy contact me yesterday, 20 minutes after I'd connected with him on LinkedIn. He said in his bio he was a life coach. And 20 minutes later, he said, I do life coaching, but I'm actually in insurance. So can we hop on a call and I can explain to you how I can help you with your insurance? I'm like, that's not selling. That's just hassling people, hoping that somebody's going to buy. You know, I worked in sales for 20 years and at quite high level for the last 10 years. And I just hate poor salesmanship, which is probably 95% of people that call themselves salespeople are just because they're just hassling people.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I'd love to talk a little bit about your actual practice. When you, as a life coach, what are the different issues that you see in people? What are the biggest things holding people back that you help people with?
Well, so this is where it kind of splits up because, you know, there's certain things I don't do. So I'm not interested in helping people set goals. You can sign up for my newsletter, get my book on that, and you don't need me to help you set goals. I'm not interested in helping people with time management because I suck at time management and I'm not very good at it. A woman phoned me not that long ago and she said, I need help with time management. I said, yeah, so do I. Do you know anybody that said you're good at it? Needless to say, she didn't hire me. So I like people that come to me that kind of aren't sure what they want. They're in that position in life, maybe, you know, like I was. So I was, you know, when I got into coaching, I was in my early 40s and just, you know, I was working in sales, earning great money, but just like really super stressed all the time and down and what have you. And I didn't know what I wanted. So that's my kind of ideal client. You know, when people used to come to me in the early days and I'd say, what is it you're looking to achieve? And they'd be like, I don't know. I'd be like, shit, well, if you don't know, how that inside my head, how the hell am I supposed to know? But now that's my kind of ideal client, somebody that just feels stuck, just got a sense that they've got more in them, more potential, there's more opportunity out there for them, but maybe they don't know what it is. And so it's kind of an unusual, it's not really a niche because most people are stuck that come to a coach. In fact, I don't really have a niche, but it's a certain type of client that I'm looking for. So, for example, I won't work with anybody under the age of about 30. I'm just not interested because, you know, they're all over the place. In my experience, people of that age, they're not quite sure what they want or whatever. So it's a very specific type of person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. For sure. And what would you say? I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background, either upbringing or your earlier life, and did that influence at all wanting to become a coach? Did you overcome certain things and say, hey, I want to help people do this? Like, how did you get to become one?
Well, that's really interesting because my background is sort of stunningly boring. I had a very normal, happy childhood. I didn't have any problems like that. Now, I think the way I got, so like I say, I kind of, like most people that worked in sales, I drifted into sales. Nobody's at school, you know, like 6, I want to be a salesperson when I grow up. So I kind of drifted into sales and worked my way up the corporate ladder to, like I say, some pretty, you know, multi-million-dollar deals and what have you, a lot really sort of long sales cycles. But and it's hard because most people don't really understand what selling's all about. It's a very technical thing. You know, it's very skilled at that level, but it's also incredibly pressurized. And I just got worn down and down and down because you do well, you close a deal or you hit a quota / target. They don't say, you know what, Tim, fantastic. Take your foot off the gas now. You go and chill out for 2 or 3 weeks. We've got you back. It's like, no, it's more and more and more. So I kind of stumbled into life coaching so originally I went to Sheffield University to do a stress management diploma in 2004. And when I was there, I didn't really add anything. It was very old school stress management, which doesn't really work very effectively. And that's something I used to do a lot in my early days with clients. And then I saw this advert for life coaching training. I just thought, that'd be cool. A, make me a better manager, and B, give me some of the tools. I had no intention of becoming a coach at that point. But when I did it, I thought, this is fantastic. And then I got talking to some people about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So I went to do a practitioner course on that, and a master prac, and another master prac, and hypnotherapy training. So I started doing all these trainings. And suddenly thought, you know what? Because we were looking at moving to America, but one of the saving graces in the UK was I accrued 5 weeks of paid vacation a year. My wife was on 8.5 weeks of paid vacation. I did not want to come to America and go back into sales and maybe have 1 paid week a year or 2. I just couldn't do that. So I said, okay, I need to make the break now. So it was kind of the time was perfect.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to go a little bit deeper on NLP. heard the term. I've read a little bit about it. I was at my friend's apartment the other night and he had all these NLP books, and I'm really excited to dig in and dive in. But how would you define NLP, and how could people maybe leverage these tools for their own growth?
Well, that's the thing. You can't define NLP. It's a big umbrella term. And when people say, NLP is pseudoscience, what they're really saying is, I have no fucking clue what NLP is. Because there's certain elements of NLP that are very, very much grounded in science. Certainly, so it's two distinct sides. Neurolinguistics. The neuro is the thing that people tend to think of, the flashbang, the rapid change stuff, fast phobia cures. And I used to do a lot of NLP like this. I was on a flight to Denver one time. One was freaking out, terrified. And I sat with her for about an hour, did a bit of hypnotherapy, and she was fine by the time we landed. So it's got this rapid change stuff that is kind of, some of it's based in science, most of it isn't, to be fair. But the linguistic side very much is. So the language patterns and that, I use that with clients all the time. And it's two distinct types of language. One is called the meta model, highly specific language. You know exactly what somebody means when you talk to them. So it's drilling down. If you say to me, everybody knows that. Well, not everybody knows it, of course. So what do you mean by everybody? I mean, my wife doesn't know what you're talking about. So it's the specific language, but then there's a flip side, which is the Milton model, which is artfully vague languages. And this is the stuff that's jumped on by cold readers. This is the stuff that's jumped on by copywriters. I can recopy things like that. I know what they're doing here. They're using this technique so that people fill in the gaps. They kind of say very little so that we rush to fill the gaps with that kind of style. So it's so big. I mean, I'd love to come on and talk to you. I could talk to you for hours about NLP and get into how it started and what have you. But like I say, it's like saying, well, tell me about medicine. It's like, well, which bits? It's like that. There's over 500 patterns, and they call them patterns. But things that probably the most powerful part about NLP, and NLP didn't invent this because it's also the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is reframing or cognitive reappraisal, they call it in CBT, which is basically looking at a situation, not changing it, but putting your interpretation of it so you can feel better about it. And reframing is super powerful. Loads of science, especially now new neuroscience, to support that. And I would encourage anybody to learn how to reframe. It can change your life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I like your analogy of like what's medicine or what's math.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, but if you do you have either a resource or a primer book or somewhere where people could get started?
There actually isn't, and that this is the difficulty with it. There isn't one book. So the first two books on NLP, probably the first book on NLP, but it's not in print anymore. So you're gonna have to pay 20 or 30 bucks for it. It's called, I beg your pardon, the second one is called Frogs into Princes, and that was written by Bandel and Grinder, who started NLP. These were two. John Grinder was a linguistics professor at Santa Cruz University, and Bandler, who's a genius, mad as a hatter, but a genius, was a maths undergraduate, and they got together and started. What they started to do was model people that were super successful, like Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson, and Fritz Perls were the three they modeled. They were therapists, and then started to unpick what they did. But so that book kind of covers all different elements, because Frogs into Princes is like a workshop that they gave. But really, probably the one that I tend to, and I've not read it for years, so there's a book called NLP, The New Technology of Achievement, and that does cover a lot of it, but not one thing in any one detail. So, for instance, Bandler's written a book, and Grinder, just on reframing, and that's just one tiny element.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. I have a question because I know some of my listeners are either coaches or want to be coaches. Right. And I want to ask you a little bit more about like how to build that business in an ethical way. But I actually want to flip over for a minute and put ourselves in the shoes of a person who's interested in hiring a coach.
Right.
I'm going through something in my life, and people, first of all, I guess the first question is, what's the biggest difference between a therapist or a counselor and a coach, and which one should I hire?
That's a really tough. Have you just do you say about 5 toughest questions I could ask you? So a lot of coaches get this wrong. I hear people say coaching and therapy, they're nothing like one another. Yes, they are. They're probably 75% of it is the same. But really, with therapists, it's a broad blanket statement. It's not always true, but they tend to, the therapist will tend to go backwards to look to the root cause. Whereas a coach will tend to think, well, where are you now? Where do you want to get? And how do we plan a route to that? Mm-hmm. So that's a very down and dirty. But, so I had somebody contact me a couple of days ago from India. And I got a sense something wasn't quite right. And then I said, can you give me some more details? I need to know before I set up the consult call. And he was clearly severely depressed. Now, I'm not trained to deal with people with severe depression. I'm not trained to deal with people with moderate depression. I'll deal with mild depression, or maybe moderate if it's being controlled by a doctor. So I do have clients that are also seeing therapists. As long as I get, I ask them to get as professional courtesy to tell them or get the okay from them. But certainly things like severe anxiety, depression, bipolar, self-harm. These are all things that, are the realm of therapy. If you just feel a bit stuck and a bit down from time to time, then it's probably a coach, or if you want help with accountability or these things. But I'll touch on stuff that verges on therapy. And I know therapists now that are drifting into coaching as well, because they see it's, the potential to keep clients for longer. So normally they'd say, okay, bye, you're on your own now. Now they can slip into coaching and keep their cash register churning over.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And one other question: so when someone's coming and they maybe they engage you or they engage a coach, what advice would you give to someone who's about to start working with a coach in terms of how they can show up and get the most out of it and play full out? Like, what would you say to someone who says, I want to get the most out of this? What do I need to do?
This is tough, because what I'm going to say, I feel a little bad about saying it, because I train new coaches and going to start somewhere, but I'd look for experience first. Look for somebody that's got a track record, because, if somebody's been doing this 5 years, they must know what they do to a certain extent, where, otherwise you're going to be out of business in that time. I think the single most important thing, though, is, do you like the person? Do you drop into instant rapport when you talk to them? Do you think, yeah, I really believe in this person? Or are they trying to sell to you? So on a consult, I'll say to people, look, if you want to work with me, I'd like to work with you. Presuming I do, I will turn down at least 1 in 3 inquiries because I don't think they're right for me. I said, I'd be happy to work with you. If you want to work with me, that's great. If you want to think about it, that's great. If you want to talk to some other people I've worked with, that's great. If you don't want to do it, that's great. Just do what's right for you. I'm not going to sell you on this, because I'm not interested in pushing people to work with me. I just could not give a toss about that. You either want to work with me or you don't. So I think it's important that, if somebody's trying to push you on a call and consult, that, if you sign up now, this price won't be available next week. Yes, it will. Stop being I had a car guy tell me that the other day. He says, you can't get this price again. He dropped his price. He said, if you buy today, because I said, well, buy today, dropped his price by $5,000. I said, well, great. At least know the starting point next time I come back. But don't be pressured into doing it. Do your due diligence. If they can give you testimonials, check up on the testimonials. I've got 30 plus. I haven't added any for 3 or 4 years. There's no point. Ask about those, because it's an investment. It has to be an investment. And so, but I think the core of it is, does it feel right? If you get a negative sense about somebody, then back off. Don't be pressured into working with them no matter what.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so you've mentioned this a few times how, and I love this because I used to work in finance and co-running a hedge fund, and we were always trying to raise money for the hedge fund. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times someone would show up with a slick smile and a big check for our fund, but we know that they're going to call us every day and be like, is the fund up? Is the fund down? And they're going to yank their money out. The first month things go bad. So we really tried to say we're only looking for partners and investors who have that same long-term mindset, basically aligned with us. And you've said you turn down 1 in 3 potential leads sometimes, and you're not looking for people under 30. 2 questions. One is, what else are you looking for to say, hey, this is not for me? What qualities do you push away? And number 2, if you could just talk a little bit more about the importance for anyone who has their own business to make sure they're not just taking every cash dollar that comes in, and they're being more secure and thoughtful about who they take on as clients.
Yeah, and client, coaches do at the beginning, and I did a few times, and it always came around to bite me, Brendan. You know, if I get a bad feeling about somebody, it kind of would always go south on me. I mean, I just haven't done it for a number of years now. But I think, you know, it's personality. It's a close working relationship. So, you know, I've got a very British, sarcastic sense of humour. If I crack a joke on the consult call and it just goes stony silent, I'm like, okay, this ain't going to work. Because I can't be dancing around on eggshells. You know, if I swear and they get all offended, you know, one of the things that a lot of coaches are afraid of doing, or some of them just don't think it's relevant, which is branding. So I said before, I haven't got a very strong niche for the Day and Adventure. I've got a very strong brand. I'm the coach that swears a lot, including in my blog posts and newsletter. I use a lot of humour, a lot of metaphors and stories and what have you, and sometimes I'll ramble. You know, so most people that come to me kind of already know that. So they already either been on my newsletter list or they've read my blog posts or whatever. And normally, you know, I like the sense of humour, or I like you just tell it like it is. So when I'm working with the coaches, I've got a Facebook group just for coaches, and I'll tell them I just did a review of a load of websites. I'll just say, look, this isn't going to work. You need to rip it down and build it up again. So I think with coaches, it's just like every coach knows you get that point where somebody's talking to you, a potential client, and inside your head you go, yes, this is perfect. This is spot. You can't say that because it's going to sound so cheesy. You're my ideal client. You are bang in the middle of everything I do. But you kind of know it. And then I have to tamp down my enthusiasm. And like, look, I'd like to work with you, you know, but it's got to be right for you. So coaches, don't be tempted to take the money if you don't think you're going to have a good working relationship with it. You're going to regret it. You know, it may be $1,000 or whatever ever now. But there's nothing worse. There is nothing worse than sitting down to start a coaching session with somebody who you don't like. Yeah, I think I've had probably 5 or 6 clients in 13 years that I actually disliked the people, and I had to cut them all short. It was just like one guy was ripping off, he wasn't paying his employees, where he was taking 18 grand a month out of his own business. He thought it was super clever, and just things like that. So there has to be some. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, I'm fairly liberal. You know, I've ranted about Trump no end of times, but I've got one client at the moment who's a really great client who's a Trump supporter, but we just don't talk about that. But you know, and I respect his opinion, even though he's wrong. You know, so
yeah, no, that's helpful. Again, I think it's so important to just not take everyone under the sun. I mean, what were the biggest things that you learned early on as a coach? And I guess this is a question that can go beyond just this one segment. I was going to say, what did you learn from taking on the wrong clients early on? But I guess the other question is, how have you changed as a coach, you know, over your time and experience? And do you do different methodologies, and how are you different now?
I think the biggest difference is I work much quicker now because, you know, I just haven't worked with, you know, I don't know how many clients, so it's well over 1,000. No, it wouldn't be, but well over 500. But I think in the early days, so I can think of one client I took on who was very mildly Asperger's, and with certain types of clients. So, for example, you know, I see coaches now dealing with people with ADHD, which is fine. They can definitely be coached, and so could this guy. But here's what you need to do that: you need a shitload of patience. And I haven't got it. Now I work for 12 months with clients, but they're nearly always life coaches who are looking to build a business and start. I just want to move quick. I get frustrated with coaches when they come into the Facebook group and ask, how do you get clients to work with you for longer? The question should be, how do I work as quickly as I can and get this client on the way so I don't create a dependent relationship or a codependent relationship? I need their money and they need me. Now, it's okay. Some people can afford to have a coach all the time. I have a coach all the time. I probably only get together with her every couple of months. But I think was appreciating, okay, I can't take that type of client. I can't take this type of client. I had a guy come to me one time, and he came to the first meeting. It was a face-to-face, when he used to do face-to-face. And he didn't tell me this on the consult, and I didn't get a hint of it, to be honest with you. He said, oh, I'm bipolar. I'm like, oh, shit, okay. But he said, don't worry, it's managed. And I said, okay. So he said, and he was super wealthy, and he got his own business, so he got nobody to report to. So he said, I want you to hold me accountable. You must hold me accountable. I said, fine, I ain't got a problem with that. So we booked in the second session, and he didn't turn up. So I sent him an email saying, okay, that's one session. You're paying for that, even though you didn't turn up. And 5 minutes later, the phone went, and he was on the other end, and he just unleashed this torrent of abuse and that. And I just started laughing, and I just laughed and laughed. And eventually, he just ran out of steam. He says, "Well, I'm glad you've got a good sense of humour." Hung up, didn't work with him again. But I should have said, when he told me he's bipolar, I should have said, "Okay, bipolar is so tricky. Even people that have got it under relative control, it can tip one way or the other sometimes." So there's never been a time where I carried on working with somebody when I didn't think it was a good thing, that it didn't blow up in my face. Never.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such good advice. Thank you, Tim, for sharing that. I want to ask you a question about, let's say you do a consult with someone and you're very well aligned with what they want or what they need, and you know that they would work well with you. You know that if they engage you, their life could really transform, or something great could happen in their life. And you know that they have money. You know that they can afford it. It might be a little out of their price range, but you know they have some disposable income and they don't want to pay. How do you sell, or what's your sales process or mindset around that? Because I know you never want to push someone too hard or be unethical, but if you know you can really change their life and you know they have the money and they're just really resistant, because these types of things require investment, whether it's therapy or coaching, like it's not that cheap, but that's because it can be so transformative. How do you deal with situations like that?
Well, first of all, it very rarely happens, and I'll tell you for why. Because my prices are on, not only on the life coaching page, but also there's a rates page, so most people know what I'm going to charge before. Also, if that happens and they're reluctant to pay the pricing, I've missed something in the sales process there. If you get to that point where they don't want to do it, you've missed. You haven't really understood. If I know that they can benefit from it and they're reluctant to pay it, that means I haven't explained the benefit of it to them properly. So then if I want to go down that path, it's looping back and going back to the beginning of the sales process and saying, okay, look, help me understand. You've said you want to achieve this. How are you going to feel in a year's time if you haven't achieved that? What's that worth to you to having that? Let's suppose you got that now. What is it worth to you? Is it not worth $2,000 or whatever? If it isn't, that's fine. But so, there's various sales things you can do, but I tend to just back off. I get a bit complacent because I'm not struggling for clients. I just, but in that scenario, it would have mean I've missed something in the sales process, definitely.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I guess, so you're more comfortable, you have a bigger client base. What would you say to someone who's like, because you're getting all these LinkedIn emails, and so you see all these 25-year-olds, and I think being hungry is fantastic. They have high energy. They're channeling it in the wrong way. They're being pushed. What would you say to someone who's like 28 and would come to you and say, Tim, I know I'm screwing up. I know I'm pushing people too hard. I'm too aggressive, but like, I need the money. Like I don't have any clients yet. What advice would you give them?
I don't care. So the email I was talking about yesterday, I got it, and I said I responded. Usually I'll just delete them out. I responded and I said, the fact that he said he was a life coach and then he wanted to sell me insurance. I said, that's a new low for LinkedIn. Well done. And he came back and he says, you don't understand, I've had a real tough life. I said, I don't give a fuck. There's loads of people that have had tough lives that don't resort to extorting money out of people, which that's probably, I'm probably going over the top there, Brandon, but it really is. If you're pushing clients to hire you that you don't think are a great fit, then you are absolutely stealing money. So I don't give a shit how poor you are. There's poor people. Go and get another job. Go and learn how to sell properly or whatever. Don't try and justify that by saying, well, I'm tight for cash.
Yeah, I totally agree. So my question now is, that person who's tight for cash, what should he be doing differently? Like, how can someone like deal with that in a healthy way? If someone came to me and was like, I screwed up, like I want to do this differently, Tim, what should I do?
I'd say, okay, if you want to work with me, I'll teach you how to sell properly. Let's sell properly. It's about building relationships. What that guy did on LinkedIn yesterday was the equivalent of him stopping me in a mall and saying, can I sell you some insurance? It's like, you don't know what I need. You don't know who I am. You don't know anything about me.
Yeah.
It's about you build relationships by adding value to other people. Yeah. So in my Facebook group, I give away, there's nothing people said to me, what don't you show on your blog or your newsletter? Nothing. Everything that I've got to help people, I'll share. So it's like being a resource to people. Let people see you as like, and then the whole reciprocity comes in. You've helped them; they want to help you. You can't do this. The coaches that scare me, Brendan, the ones that come in and say, "I've got to earn 150 grand in the first year." Like, okay, but that's scary because you're under pressure all the time. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's phenomenally difficult. Especially if you're just doing it online. It takes time to start to build up relationships and what have you. So nobody would set up it's almost like setting up a restaurant and you haven't got a kitchen. It's just like you're pushing people into the door. But I need the money. Yeah, but you haven't got a fucking kitchen. It's probably a rather strange analogy there, but you know what I mean. It's kind of like just because it's coaching, people think it's his excuse, or these high ticket closers, even though they've. I had a kid contact me. He must be about 20. I'm like, I can help you close high ticket deals. Listen, closing deals. That's the thing with sales. What people don't understand. So you see books like, 101 ways to close the deal. Here's how you close a deal. Would you like to go forward? Would you like to sign a contract? Would you like to buy this? Because closing is the easiest thing if you've done everything else. When people are trying to come up, I've talked to you, we spoke a few minutes ago, when people are looking for ways to close the deal, it means they've missed something in the process. Sales is very, very structured as the way it moves down the process. Closing is the easiest part of sale, but it's the part that people think they can shortcut.
Yeah, no, that's such great advice. And before we sort of get into the closing, where people can find you, I want to just ask you another question, not on the sales process, but on the actual coaching process. We've talked about some different strategies, NLP, and tools how you've developed. One thing you said in the beginning of this conversation was one thing that makes a good coach is the questions that they ask. Right. What kind of questions do you generally ask that makes you an effective coach? And what other things do you do that you think makes a good coach?
Well, I think there's three things you need to be a good coach. You need to be able to build rapport. If you can't build rapport with your prospective clients, they're not going to open up to you. They're not going to hire you in the first place. But then, when you're at a high level of rapport, you can get away with saying some incredible things to clients, really pushing them or what have you. And then, like you just said, you need to be able to ask great questions. But probably the toughest one, and salespeople have difficulty with this, it's shutting the fuck up when you've asked a good question. It's not. I've seen clients ask good questions, coaches ask good questions, and then because there's a little bit of science, they've rushed in to fill it by answering another question or whatever. In terms of what good question, really, this is the thing. When you get to doing it a long time, the questions just come to you without you necessarily thinking about it. There's just so many different scenarios where you can do so many different questions. I mean, I like to kick off and this is a question, it's dead simple, it's dead straightforward, that I read it in a Michael Bungay's Stania book, which is starting a session by saying, so what's on your mind? So you get straight into coaching rather than spending time talking about, trivia or what's the weather like, or how are you feeling today, or stuff like that. You get straight into coaching. But there's, I've written a number of posts with killer questions. Two questions that will flick somebody into a reframing mindset. So what else can that mean? So if somebody says, they're bitching and whining about something, what else can it mean? And the other one is, what can you learn from that? If somebody's had a negative experience, okay, so what can you, both those questions flip somebody into reframing. So if you think, well, what can I learn from it? Suddenly it's not such a, it's maybe a crappy experience, but I can learn something from it and carry that forward. And, what else can this mean? Which maybe it means I was in a bad mood or whatever. So yeah, I could literally go on forever talking about questions. So what was the other one? What was the follow-up with that? What were the questions?
It was sort of like
three things. What are the things to be a coach? Yeah.
In addition to asking questions,
and they're just in the coaching set in an actual session. I think also to be a good coach, you've got to understand marketing, unless you can afford to pay somebody to do it all for you.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I love how you sort of flip the question around on them. And then what I really love that you said was you asked the question and maybe they're just having to process those emotions or like get comfortable with getting their answer out. and you've already interrupted them.
Yeah,
And now,
it's classic. It's exactly the same in sales. If you ask, you just shut up, because people are uncomfortable with silence. As a coach, you can't be, because that, you may be dealing with somebody that's just taking longer to process it. And if you dive in, you just kill the whole, everything good you've done is just wiped out, because then they may well feel disrespected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tim, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story. Before we do the final wrap up, what's one thing that you would like to share with people who, because, in our society today, depression, anxiety, all these things are at all-time highs. What's one tip that you could give to people, maybe not to go necessarily get a coach, but a way they can invest in their lives and improve their lives?
Thanks for sending me that in advance, so I could have thought about it. I hate getting questions in advance. Well, I'm going to actually use a quote, my favourite quote. It's from Shakespeare, from Hamlet, I think. And it was, there is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it true. And what that basically means is it's how we see things. There's no good or bad in nature. There's no lion like feeling guilty for eating the buffalo, or whatever. Nature just goes on, and we dictate how we feel about situations. So there is a book, actually. There's a book called As a Man Thinketh, by a guy called James Allen, who was a Jesuit priest in the UK in the 1920s, I think. And it's only about 80 pages long. It pretty much sums up all self-development. So I've just recently stopped writing about self-development because I'm bored with it. But As a Man Thinketh, it's just like, it's how you think about things. Of course, there are people that have got, chemical imbalances or what, in terms of, depression or whatever. But for most people, it's their attitude.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Sounds like, old school self-development there, which I'm not too keen on a lot of it, but it's true. It's you decide how you think about things.
Yeah, it's our interpretation of the events, not the events themselves.
Of course it is. And that's always true unless it's something physical. So it's never cause and effect. So if I said to you, Brenda, you're such a tool, this interview sucks, you could be offended, but not because of what I said, but what you think that means. So it's like, oh my God, you might go telling people online or whatever. It's what we do. So it's never, there's always that interpretation we give things, When somebody, I've had people plenty of times attack me on social media or send me emails. One woman sent me this email one time, and since about 12 o'clock at midnight, I was still just on my laptop with the wife. She was watching telly, and she said, why don't you fuck off back to England, you queen-loving, limey bastard. And I just thought it was hysterical. Now, some people will get upset about that. When people have a go at me on social media, it just makes me laugh. So I could get offended.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that's going to achieve.
That's such a good attitude. I remember when I first launched Facebook ads for one of my old Instagram courses, I got some of the wildest responses and comments.
Yeah,
and at first I was so angry. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to have fun with this. You delete the comments. You can laugh at them. You don't have to let them get to your, if that bothers me, that's on me to work through that. My interpretation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tim, this has been an absolute pleasure, a blast. So much learning going on. Where can people find you online, your website, this Facebook group, your email list?
Okay, well, probably two things. The business where I work with coaches is called coachthelifecoach.com. And then they can access the Facebook group from there. I don't know what the number is. It's just a string of numbers. And then my private practice is adaringadventure.com. And don't follow me on Twitter or Facebook, my person. I just troll Trump and swear and just tell jokes and what have you. I always say to coaches, for God's sake, don't try and do what I do on social media. You're going to kill your business, So from my Twitter account now, I've got, 5,500 followers. I don't even link back to my website anymore. I just use it to dick about and be a tool, to be honest.
Cool. Well, so coachthelifecoach.com. I see it right here. I just popped in my own email. I can't wait to get your emails and updates. But thanks again so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for asking me. I enjoyed it.